This meeting is now called to order. I'd like to welcome everyone this evening. For roll call, everyone is in attendance. We'll now take a moment of reflection and respect, please. Thank you. Next item up is confirmation of the agenda.
That council adopts the agenda for the meeting of October 19th, 2020 as presented.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Oslech and Councillor Charlton. Are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Being none, we'll move on to delegations and public meetings. And we do have one this evening, so I need the resolution, please.
That council recess at 7:01 p.m. to commence a committee of adjustment hearing to consider application A120 made by Joseph and Jasmine DeClara, owners of property known municipally as 206 Sydenham Street East in the town of Aylmer.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Chapman and Deputy Mayor Andrews. All those in favor? And that's carried. The Committee of Adjustment of the Town of Aylmer is convened to consider application A120. Additional information relating to the applications is available for inspection between 8:30 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. weekdays at Aylmer Town Hall. Signed written submissions shall be accepted by the Secretary Treasurer prior to or during the hearing, and such submissions shall be available for inspection by any interested party. In addition, if a party who is notified does not attend the hearing, the committee can proceed and the party is not entitled to any further notice of hearings. A copy of the decision will be mailed to those persons who attend or are represented at the hearing, and those who have filed a written request with the Secretary for notice of the committee's decision. The committee will receive input in the following order: agent or applicant, the public, the Director of Corporate Services, the clerk. Application number A120 is made by Joseph and Jasmine DeClara, the owners of the property known municipally as 206 Sydenham Street East in the town of Aylmer. The applicant is requesting a minor variance from the requirements of the town's zoning bylaw number 5799 as amended. The applicant is seeking relief from section 9.3F zone requirements, rear yard depth minimum from 7 meters, 24.5 feet to 3.35 meters, 11 feet for the purpose of constructing 11.89 square meter, 128 square foot addition on the existing single detached dwelling. In addition, the subject property is noted as containing an existing single detached dwelling with continuing legal, non-conforming front yard depth and rear yard depth already in existence. The proposed addition would extend the existing non-conformity in rear yard depth and is not proposed to encroach further into the required rear yard. Is the applicant agent present? And if so, do you wish to speak to the application?
Yes, I am. It's Joe DeClara, but I don't have any additional comments to make, I think.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Could the Director of Legislative Services clerk confirm whether or not Any members of the public wished to speak to the application?
Through you, Madam Chair, there was no correspondence received from members of the public with regard to this application.
Okay, thank you. Could the Director of Corporate Services provide comments about the application?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. The application is a small addition on the rear of the existing single detached dwelling. And as mentioned in the report, it continues an existing non-conforming rear yard. And the committee's responsibility this evening is to consider confirming the existing legal non-conforming status of the front and rear yard. And the minor variance is contemplated to extend the existing non-conformity to allow the 128 square foot addition to be constructed.
Okay, thank you. Has the clerk received any communications related to this application?
Through you, Madam Chair, we did receive correspondence from the Catfish Creek Conservation Authority indicating that they've got no concerns with the application. The MTO also submitted correspondence today in relation to the application, noting that they had no concerns.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, are there any questions? Member Barber, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Cale, if I may, and maybe you can help me understand the processing of this particular application. Understanding a minor variance on a typical side yard, 4 feet, and then somebody requests that it go down to 3 or 2, you're cutting it in half. And then it's based on those particular merits. On a backyard at 25 feet and going to 11, two-part question. Is that considered still a minor variance? And once that particular question is answered, why was there not consideration for a zoning bylaw amendment to define all of the parameters of the property?
Through you, Madam Chair. Specifically, the tests of a minor variance are whether they are indeed minor in nature, and the addition of 128 square feet on the existing corner lot, which measures a total of 7,494 square feet, is considered minor in our opinion. And at this time, extending the nonconformity is only where it already exists. So for example, this encroachment already exists today. They're just lengthening the size of the building that encroaches that far. If this was a new encroachment, Member Barber, I'm not sure I wouldn't agree with you that a zone change may be the right way if this was a brand new dwelling. However, this incremental increase of 128 square feet in the context of the existing corner lot is still considered to be minor in this application.
Go ahead.
A follow-up to that question. I wasn't able to draw up any drawing in any kind of scale that I could decipher. Are you saying that the new addition is actually filling in a portion of the property that wasn't covered by a building before, an extension of a building line per se? Okay.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. I brought up on screen the drawing there, and the confusing element of this, and just to draw to the committee's attention and the general public, whilst the front door generally on the existing dwelling faces Sydenham Street, technically the front yard is the shorter of the street-facing frontages of the two streets, which actually means that the front yard is Elgin and the side yard is Sydenham. And the rear yard is the yard opposite the front yard, which makes the area, which would traditionally be seen as a side yard on most lots.
Okay, thank you.
Member Charlton?
Through your worship, how did this property become non-conforming to start with?
Through you, Madam Chair, to Member Charlton, the term legal non-conforming relates to buildings in existence in their current location prior to 1999, when the town's consolidated zoning bylaw was passed. So this building being in existence in this form prior to 1999 means that it would be legal non-conforming existence, and the shape it was already in did not conform to the zoning bylaw generally as it was updated in 1999.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions? Okay, seeing none, there is a resolution.
That report Corp 4620 entitled 206 Sydenham Street East minor variance be received for information, and that the committee support the minor variance application for land known municipally as 206 Sydenham Street East in the town of Elmer, and further, that relief is hereby granted from zoning bylaw 5799 as amended, and more specifically section 9.3F to reduce the rear yard depth minimum from 7.5 meters to 3.35 meters for the purpose of constructing a bedroom addition and extend linearly the existing non-conforming rear yard depth on the property.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Member Charlton and Member Chapman, are there any further questions or comments? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. We now have another resolution, please.
That the Committee of Adjustment hearing is adjourned at 7:11 p.m.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Member Ham and Member Oslach, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Okay, we have another resolution, please.
That the council meeting be reconvened at 7:11 p.m.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Chapman, any questions or comments? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up on the agenda is the adoption of council and committee minutes. Minutes to approve.
That council approves the following minutes. Regular virtual council session held on October 5th, 2020.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Charlton and Councillor Chapman, are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Minutes to receive.
That council receives the following minutes. Elmer Cemetery Board meetings held November 26th, 2019, January 7th, 2020, January 28th, 2020, and July 7th, 2020. Elgin Area Primary Water Supply System meetings held March 5th, 2020, and June 3rd, 2020. Elmer Area Secondary Water Supply System meeting held June 3rd, 2020, and Main Street Elmer meeting held September 17th, 2020.
Okay, are there any questions or comments? Councillor Charlton. I think you're on mute, Councillor Charlton. Are you having problems with your sound, Councillor Charlton? Yes. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, before we move on, Josh, could you again just remind me, did we get someone to move and second this? I'm sorry, I got sidetracked trying to hear Councillor Charlton.
Through your worship, we still require a mover and seconder.
Okay, I didn't think we'd got to that point yet. Okay, so someone to move, so Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Oslach. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is the consent agenda.
Right. That items A to H of the October 19th, 2020 consent agenda be adopted as presented with actions to be taken as noted.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Barber and Councillor Chapman. Are there any questions or concerns with the consent agenda? Councillor Charlton?
Through your worship, I see there's item A, E, and G. They could be quite pertinent to our community. Will those reports, they'll just be in the minutes and be on the website, or will they be specifically mentioned? And I'm off again.
Okay, we'll turn that over to the CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not sure specifically in relation to items A and I think he said E, specifically if there's items there that council wishes to have published in addition to the agenda, we can add those to the website. But you just give us that direction if you would. In relation to item G, that document has been circulated on our website, as well as it's been provided to the chamber for information as well.
Okay, thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Charlton?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? Deputy Mayor Andrews.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would like to pull item H and put that into action item for further discussion, please.
Okay, Clerk, how do you want to handle this?
Through Your Worship, Deputy Mayor Andrews has made a motion to pull item H, so we'll just need a seconder for that, and then we'll resolve the remainder of the consent agenda and address item H afterwards.
Okay, thank you. So will someone second it? Councillor Chapman? You're seconding it? Okay, thank you. All right, so we're gonna just discuss the rest of the consent agenda before we discuss item 8. So are there any other discussions with any of the other items? Okay, seeing none then, we'll clear this up first. All those in favor? And that's carried. Now we'll move on to item H. Do we have something written up for this as a resolution?
Through Your Worship, I was provided with a resolution. Is there any chance that does Deputy Mayor Andrews wish to speak to it, or would you like me just to provide the resolution off the bat here?
Well, I think what we'll do is if you could read the resolution, and we'll get a mover and a seconder, and then we'll have Deputy Mayor or any other councillor that would like to speak to this item, if that's all right with you.
Certainly, Your Worship. That council receives the notice of resolution 68/2020 from the Aylmer Police Service Board for information, and that council authorizes the additional expenditure in the 2020 budget year and the transfer of funds from the Town of Aylmer Police Reserve for the purchase of a cruiser in the amount of $41,906.17.
Okay, so we'll get someone to move and second this, please. So Councillor Charlton and Deputy Mayor Andrews. And now we'll open it up for questions and comments about this. Deputy Mayor Andrews, would you like to comment?
I just want to, I'll make a comment through Your Worship. So the police services purchased a new unit for the force, and we are just looking for the approval for council.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor Andrews. Are there any comments, questions about this? Seeing none, all those in favor? Oh, sorry, Councillor Oslach, I didn't see your hand go up. Do you have a comment?
Yes, Your Worship. Just a comment. Isn't this a budget item?
Maybe the CAO could give us more information on how this works.
Certainly, through you, Your Worship. I think, excuse me, I think likely what you're recalling in the budget was a line item to authorize a transfer to the reserves. So in essence, what that does is it authorizes the finance department to tax for reserve fund, and that goes into the reserve or into kind of what you would call a savings account, if you will. And that was included in the budget and set aside for future replacement of a cruiser.
Okay, is that all right with you, Councillor Oslach, or do you have further questions?
Yeah, I thought it was a budget item, Your Worship, but it's answer my question. Yes.
Oh, okay, perfect. Any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is action items, and it's report CAO 7920.
That report, CAO 7920, entitled Annual Accessibility Plan Status Report, be received for information.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Ham. Are there any questions or comments concerning this report? And do you have anything further to add, Jenny?
Nothing too much through you, Your Worship. Just a couple of noted periods there in the report. The next reporting period to the ministry will be December 31st, 2021. And then the next, also the next goal to achieve in maintaining our accessibility requirements is January 1st, 2021. And that is the requirement to upgrade, to have our website and all its content in an accessible format. Council authorized the webpage RFP. I think it was at the previous meeting. So that project will satisfy our requirements for accessibility.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions, comments about this report? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is Corp 4620.
That report, Corp 4620, entitled Technology Upgrades, Town Hall and Old Town Hall, be received for information, and that Council directs staff to proceed with the proposed technology upgrades at Town Hall, and further that Council refer the upgrade of the technology at Old Town Hall to the 2021 budget deliberations.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second this report. Councillor Oslach and Deputy Mayor Andrews. Do you have anything further to add, Kale, to your report?
Through you, Your Worship, I don't at this time, but I just wish that to draw attention for council that by delaying the Old Town Hall upgrades till 2021, council would be conscious that that would not be a venue available to host a hybrid meeting until at least 2021.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions, comments? Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Worship. Just so I understand where we are in the getting a permanent home for council meetings, we discussed the expansion of the council chambers in the town hall, and we also discussed the possibilities of moving the council meetings per se to the old town hall. Where are we in the town hall project? And if that is a relatively soon project, would we still have the priority to move technologically into the old town hall?
Through you, Your Worship, we have actually had an engineer in to review the building at 25 Center Street. We did go through the building and try to establish a footprint that would work, that would allow social distancing to occur for councillors and staff to be in the building. No one room that is currently, as it's configured, would satisfy that need. So there is, we've had an engineer in to confirm the details of the building on what it would take to create a room that large. And I'm afraid that that project is going to be substantial and will be referred to 2021 budget. We hope to have some numbers for council to consider by that time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Kale. Are there any other questions, comments? Councillor Chapman?
It's just a really high price tag. So can you explain why it's as high? I think I understand, but I would like it explained.
Through Your Worship, yes, it does seem high. I will agree with you that our initial quote earlier in the year in April identified there as a little bit lower. The suggestion was that we would increase our speed and we would have dedicated internet. So that means that no one else shares the line with us. And that's the reason why the cost is so high on a monthly basis, is that we would have uninterrupted access to that bandwidth without having other businesses or people in the area clogging that feed of internet. Still a good question whether that is the right amount for us or whether we would be able to look at something a little bit slower that would be totally suffice. I think it's really hard from a technical perspective for our existing staff to make those decisions. We're going with the best advice we can get from Eastlink, and that is all we can rely on at this time. So to say it is expensive or not, I don't have the technical expertise to say really whether that is. It could be very discount for what we're getting. But that is what we're being suggested.
Thank you.
Councillor Oslach?
Yes, Your Worship. We do have a high-speed fiber optic cable into our little video room because we broadcast over cable every council session. So that is really a good feed. I don't know if we can tap into that. I don't know about that because I know that is a very good feed. It's a fiber optic. They put it in about 3-4 years ago, and they put it in specifically for council television production. So I don't know about if we could use that or not.
Through Your Worship, staff did inquire in that instantly at the onset of the pandemic. We were hoping to do these evening broadcasts through that exact stream from Town Hall. And we technically do not own that stream. That's Eastlink. We have never paid for that bill. That is their infrastructure to support the camera. Yeah. And we do not have access to that to broadcast nor use our day-to-day, I'm afraid.
Oh, too bad. It's free.
Are there any further questions or comments about this report? Councillor Chapman.
Even if we don't move our meetings to the Old Town Hall, I still think that it's a good investment to put internet into the town hall because in the future for meetings there, it will make it more marketable for business meetings where they need to use the internet. So I don't think that it's a bad idea to do it. I was just questioning the cost of it. So everything comes with a price, and I just wanted an explanation of why it was the price that it was.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Chapman. Any further questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is Finance 1820.
That report, Finance 1820, entitled Quarterly Financial Summary Report, Quarter 3, be received for information.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Charlton and Councillor Chapman. Did you have anything further, Cale, to talk about on this particular report?
Through Your Worship, I did want to follow up. Last time we did bring the half-year reports, we were asked where we were versus 2019, and just a bit of update on that. As of third quarter in 2019, we were at 86% of our revenues versus 83% currently, and our expenses in 2019 were at 66% versus 61% currently. So you can see some evidence that staff have been doing their best to manage the costs, and current costs that have been allocated specifically to COVID-19 expenses, including additional PPE and sanitary applications, is just over $65,000 so far in 2020.
Okay, thank you, Kale. I have a question for you, Kale, and maybe I should have called you first because it's maybe hard for you to get the number, but I'm curious as to how our property taxes, are they being paid? Are they up to date? Like at what percentage do you think we're at with the property tax collections?
Certainly, Your Worship. We've had an excellent year on collections. We have collected a number of arrears. However, our write-offs, which are through processes outside of our own, are running slightly higher than budgeted. So the two are likely going to net off slightly, our advanced recoveries versus our slightly higher write-offs than usual. Now, one thing I would call to attention of council is that the way the property tax system runs is that when we invoice the final billing, it is recorded as revenue. So when our revenues are at 86% or 83% of a normal year, we are expecting full collection. So the way that money comes back off the system is through write-offs, which can take many years to show up. So to answer your question, yes, we're having an excellent year with collection of any previous arrears. We have had some impact-related adjustments in terms of write-offs that are slightly higher than budgeted, but overall, we are not seeing so far an excessive impact on property tax collection from the pandemic.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions or comments? Councillor Barber.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks, Kale, for that update. Is there anything else, any other red flags that are out there?
Through you, Your Worship, we still are operating in a very uncertain environment, and I think that there is always potential for further limitations in our operations or further compliance requirements, which can always add costs. And I think it's going to, as long as it is a very uncertain environment and a continuously changing one, that will be our largest red flag. But right now, we're hoping that we can control costs as we have in the summertime through the balance of the year and use the funds that were allocated from the restart money to help offset the COVID expenses we're having specifically. And
just to follow up to that, if I may, are non-taxation revenues being challenged?
Through Your Worship, obviously rental of facilities is substantially down. That said, we have tried to offset those costs as best we can. However, those are still substantial pieces of our revenue streams. But as far as things like the Ontario Municipal Partnership funding and other grant funding, we continue to receive those. So a large portion of our revenue streams are pretty secure. Now, Jenny may wish to add something as well, just in terms of red flags. I'm not sure if she is seeing anything that would be a concern as well.
Through you, Your Worship, nothing that I don't think that hasn't been mentioned. As Kale suggested, our rental revenues are significantly down, and we're finding that not only with our own operations, but certainly with the complex as well. And prior to, I guess, August, what we were seeing at the complex is, although our user revenues were significantly down, we were able to offset a majority of that through reduced overhead costs, if you will. Now that we're open, those overhead costs are increasing, but our revenues aren't kind of offsetting as much as as much as you would like, perhaps. I think otherwise, I think that we're doing relatively well in some of our other administrative revenues. So things like marriage licenses and commissioners' fees and those types of things are coming in. Buildings are coming in fairly good. I think Kale's department's doing well, or relatively well under the circumstances. And I think that is because, in my mind, I think in part because, number one, the economy is still fairly strong in Aylmer, which is great news. And number two, because our office decided to open by appointment very early on compared to some of our other folks. And so we've done relatively well, even probably in secure, for example, doing marriage licenses when other offices weren't yet open. So I think we've had fairly good results in some other areas as a result of us having our office open.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is new business and matters of urgency. Okay, seeing none. Readings of bylaws and proceedings thereon.
That council consider giving third and final reading to, excuse me, bylaw 4520, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 6818, which is a bylaw to appoint John G. Maddox as the investigator for the corporation of the town of Aylmer pursuant to sections 8, 9, 10, and 239(1) of the Municipal Act as amended. Bylaw 4620, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 6918, which is a bylaw to appoint Lisa Korab, operating as Korab Law, as the Integrity Commissioner for the Corporation of the Town of Aylmer, pursuant to sections 9, 10, 11, and 223(3) of the Municipal Act, as amended. And finally, bylaw 4720, being a bylaw to amend bylaw 5799 for Cottonwood Hills Subdivision Phase 2.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Councillor Ham and Councillor Charlton, are there any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. The next item up is inquiries by members. Councillor Charlton.
Through your worship, has there been any pressure to open up both pads of ice in the complex, or not? I noticed in the BIA minutes there was some mention that maybe both pads of ice might go open, and
I'll turn that over to Jenny, and maybe she can answer that, please.
Certainly, through you, your worship. I'm not sure whether you would call it pressure, but certainly we have had an inquiry by Aylmer Minor Hockey. The request is going to the Emergency Control Group on Wednesday for discussion to determine whether we can accommodate such a request safely. So that's question number one. If the control group deems that that's acceptable, then the CAO will draft a report for both councils to consider in relation to the opening of the second pad in future.
Thank you, Jenny. Do you have any further questions, Councillor Charlton?
Yes, I do. I was wondering if there's any bylaw or whatever to control signage on boulevards in town. I know real estate agents advertise and promote sales on boulevards, but there tends to be a bit of growth in signs that they're promoting businesses that may not particularly have anything to do with Aylmer, or certainly not in Aylmer. And I was wondering if there's a bylaw to control those, to pull them out yourself, or what?
Perhaps Cale, could you answer that, please?
Through your worship, yes, we do have a sign bylaw in town. As with any other bylaw enforcement, we are complaint driven at present during those 12 hours. So we do respond to those inquiries if they do come in a complaint form. You're allowed to advertise the business that operates on that premises. And I think if I gather correctly, Councillor Charlie, you're referring to boulevard signs that are advertising businesses even out of town, I take it.
Yes.
Yeah. So those would be not in conformity with the bylaw. So any complaint thereon would be acted upon to have those removed.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other inquiries by members? Councillor Chapman. You're muted, I believe, Councillor Chapman.
Through you, Your Worship. I just have a question about the twin pads. Is there enough requests for use to make it feasible to use both pads? Because you said the revenue that's coming in is not enough to cover the expenses. The expense of putting the new pad in, would you be able to rent it enough to recover the expense?
Jenny, would you answer that, please, if possible?
Yeah, certainly a little premature this evening for me to give an answer, but certainly those are the questions that we're looking to answer as part of the future report coming to both councils, if you will. As you know, the complex costs somewhere around $500,000 to $600,000 a year. So in a normal, if whatever a normal year might be considered, the revenues don't offset the expenditures, and certainly you wouldn't anticipate that they would. I think what staff will be doing if the control group deems that this can be managed in a safe way for both our staff and the community who visit the arena, is that we will then try to crunch some numbers to determine what we might anticipate for revenue. So I know that the staff are reaching out to several of the users to find out if there's a committed period of time that they might rent the ice, if you will, if we had an additional pad. And then we would try to anticipate what the expenditures associated with that additional pad would be. Again, what makes this so very difficult, as with anything at this time, is that things change in relation to COVID-19 almost overnight. And we've gone through those changes since March. So I might tell you today that yes, we can open, and yes, we can do it safely. And in a week from now, the restrictions are changed, and the answer then becomes no, we can't open. So we will work through that process, and a report will be pending council decision if the control group deems appropriate. The decision to open or not, based on the numbers, will of course be up to the town of Aylmer and Malahide Council.
Thank you.
Okay, any further inquiries by members? Okay, we'll move on to the next item, which is statements and committee reports. Councillor Oslach.
Just a comment, Your Worship. We have installed at the Legion automatic door openers, front and back doors for the disabled in the last 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Oslach. Deputy Mayor Andrews.
Thank you, Your Worship. As Chair of the Police Services Board, I would like to formally welcome Jack Cookett as the new provincial appointee to the board. So this was in place of Mr. Anderson, who left us. So we've been vacant for a while. So Mr. Cookett is now stepping in that position. He's being sworn in. So I'd just like to welcome him formally to the Police Services Board.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Andrews. Are there any other statements or committee reports? Okay, seeing none. I have no report this evening. Notice of motion. And meeting closed to the public.
The council moves into a meeting closed to the public at 7:43 p.m. for the purpose of considering the security of the property of the municipality, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal employees, and a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality.
Okay, someone to move and someone to second. Deputy Mayor Andrews and Councillor Charlton, are there any questions or comments? All those in favor? And that's carried. And we'll just take a few minutes before we go into a closed meeting. Thank you.
This conference is no longer being recorded.